Pastor Raymond out here on the West Coast, and it's been somewhat of a vacation. I've seen a lot of friends that I haven't been able to see, and it's been very interesting, but I haven't fished one time, and it's been a different trip for me this year. But you can see it's absolutely gorgeous, and maybe you can hear the Coast Guard helicopters in back of me and the seagulls chirping, and that's the Washington side there, the Columbia River, and it leads to the Washington side behind me there. And so I just thought it would be a good time to do a Bible news update and look at what is happening in the world, and not get too far behind on this day. So let's just kind of jump into it and pray here first. Lord God, we worship you and love you. We're very grateful for what you are doing in our lives. We have a personal friendship with you. And as a church, we have a work to do toward these end dark times, Lord. And yet it's bright out because of your sun always shines. And you said as long as the sun is shining and the moon is shining, that your promises to Israel are going to be completed and your work will be completed. So we appreciate you and love you so very much. Be with us and help us to learn something and love you in Jesus' name. Amen. So let's just kind of get right into it. Some of the good news: a youth pastor in Texas says an outpouring of revival is taking place there at AM Corpus Christi, that's down there on the Gulf, and no signs of slowing down, as hundreds have already given their life to Jesus and were water baptized daily. In the spring of 22 it started, and it's just going on. And so that's some really good news, and we love hearing that kind of stuff. And we would love to see a nationwide revival. There's no indication of that in scriptures that there would be a worldwide revival or anything like that. Things are going to continue to get worse. But we look forward to see what God is doing. Remember what the Lord told Habakkuk and Paul told us, that we are to walk by faith. The just shall live by faith, and endure the times that are come, and actually look for his coming and the hope of his coming. His hope to us in our hearts is what sustains us in the dark times and the things to come. So I hope you're intrigued today by what the Lord is doing, and you rejoice in him always, even through troubled times, like Paul said in Philippians. So let's go to the next thing. Revival breaking out at Auburn. Hundreds choose Christ and get spontaneously baptized in the lake. I love the idea of spontaneous baptisms. There was never any indication in the Bible that they had to sign up and take classes and be baptized. It was always immediate. Remember that African that met Philip, he wanted to be baptized right away, and he asked, what is to keep me from being baptized? And nothing. They took him right down to a nearby creek there or whatever and let him have it. Praise the Lord. So good things there. Another good thing in some cases, the world's richest known lithium deposit is found in Maine. And yet, this is some bad news here. Maine's not going to let us have it. Maine is not going to rip up their lands like many of the third world countries have done. However, and that was, you can see that's in, that one was just found this last couple months ago. But look at August 11, 2023. 5 years ago, gem hunters found the richest known lithium deposit in the world, and that's in Maine. But watch this. This recent one is found in Oregon and Nevada. I'll get to that in a second. Where is that? Right there. A lithium deposit has been discovered within the McDermott caldera. Is estimated to hold between 20 and 40 million metric tons. So Nevada's a little bit more conservative state, and they've ripped up some of their lands before. It'll be interesting to see what they get out of this. Of course, lithium is huge in the battery industry and some other things. So that's a huge deal for the United States. Oil's not going to go anywhere. Electric batteries are going to be important, but they're not going to take over right away. As this person said, here, look at Biden's EV push. Rivian CEO doubts the future of gas-powered. And so I think gas is going to be around here a while. I believe that the spoils in the Middle East have to do with oil. We know that there's diamonds now that have been, more diamonds have been found in Israel, and some great wealth in Israel and the Middle East besides oil. But oil, I think, is still going to be around, and it's actually what is bringing the world to a huge fight, even right now. So more to come on that, of course. Severe flooding all over in Algeria and China, England, France, Indonesia, Morocco, Oman, many places in Spain, and many places in China. There's been severe flooding. You can see up there on the right there, 10 counties and territories saw severe flooding in just 12 days, according to CNN. So that, on top of the famines that are starting to strike in portions of Africa in a big way, Yemen in a huge way for the last several years, and the drought situations that we have in the United States and all across the globe. And I want to remind you that, we don't see a whole lot of flooding happening in repetitive flooding, I mean, in the Bible. Of course, the world was deluged by the major flood. The Lord said he would not destroy the earth that way again. But one of the punishments for a nation that has gone unrighteous is famine and drought. And that is happening in a big way. And then, of course, these floods are thrown in here on top of that. Libya, a huge storm there. They really don't know up to now. I'm trying to get up-to-date reports. Some say 4,000 are dead. Some say 11, but up to 20. They really do not know. They're finding bodies all over the place, and what a tragedy this is, based on top of the Moroccan quake. So this is all happening in, of course, northern Africa, and it's very interesting times that the Lord is giving people these indications that, the tribulation is to come. In this world you have tribulation. Be of good cheer. Jesus has overcome the world, and so we need to turn to him for these times that are happening now. These dark times that we're coming into are pointing the way forward. They're reminding us that God is angry with the planet, with sin, and that he is going to come back and judge the world. These are wake-up calls. These are things that the Lord is doing to get our attention, so that we will look to him and it will cry to him for help. We'll see him for our need of sin and life eternal. So that is what's happening here. The Lord is not mean, and these things are not happening by happenstance. I don't believe that the Lord particularly chooses this or that in a lot of ways. In particular, sometimes I do think he does, but in general, things are coming in on the planet, all over the planet. And so again, how many nations are under the flood warnings and washes and earthquakes? This is South Africa. Look at the waves. These are just waves coming out of the ocean, extreme waves, pushing those cars around. If you go look at the video, pushing those cars around and stuff. And so some really tragic times. But this is going back to Libya. This was that storm. They call it a medicane. They're coming up with all kinds of, instead of a hurricane, it's a medicane. And I heard that several years ago. Remember, I was a weather guy in the Air Force, and this stuff kind of makes me laugh. They started naming the winter storms several years ago, a decade ago or more, and it just kind of makes me laugh. It's a kind of a media thing, but to be frank, these things are getting so large that they're naming them, even in the winter or in the Mediterranean. This one is called Daniel, which I thought was really interesting. And you recall, I have here, his name means God is my judge. And there's Christians up there. Did you know that there's Jews? There's synagogues up there along Tunisia and some other places along North Africa there. So there's old Jewish culture up there and synagogues and stuff. So God is warning his people everywhere. And when these things come across, we should really cry out to the Lord first of all, and then pass the word that God is out to save people, and he wants to save us. So there's another picture of it. You can see here that it was down to the southwest, and then it came down to the southwest, and then it moved up toward the east, and there it's right over Libya right there. And this is the devastation. It came right over this city, dropped a ton of rain, Derna, and just dropped a ton of rain. And what's another thing that's interesting, here's another picture of it. It's just, I mean, you couldn't get any better than that the strength of the storm is out over the water, wrapping that moisture back around onto the ground, and you get some orographic cliff, we call it, and it turns to rain, heavy rains, and that's what they're getting there. And so it washed 2 dams away. You've heard all this, I'm sure, but it washed 2 dams away, and there's so many people missing. It's a complete devastation, whether it's Muslim or Christian area, or secular, doesn't matter. It's a devastation, and it's very, very sad. The water's pushed out, dragging everything and everybody with it that was in its way. There's just a couple more pictures of it. You can see the guy standing on the road. The bridge is gone. Buildings are gone. Very devastating. So here's it's interesting background here a little bit. A spokesperson for a water resource ministry committee investigating the dam's collapse told Reuters that the contractor was unable to complete the works because of the security situation. I'll lead up to this. Hang on. 2 officials at Derna municipality also told Reuters work on the dams contracted before Gaddafi's fall had been impossible to carry out afterwards because the city was occupied by Islamic State and besieged for several years. Even as the catastrophe was unfolding on Sunday night, the Water Resources Ministry issued a post on its Facebook page telling residents not to worry. The dams are in good condition and things are under control. It said, "We lost thousands in all the wars in the past 10 years," somebody said, "but in Derna, we lost them in 1 day." In 1 day. Now, this is very interesting. Excuse me. Working up to this, Gaddafi was like the Iraqi president. Excuse me. His name escapes me for some reason. Saddam Hussein, and really Assad in Syria, and others. And what these Islamists do is they have such tight control on their people. And when the terrorists get out of hand, their armies take them out, put them in prison, kill them, whatever it takes. And so these hardliners like Gaddafi and Saddam and Assad, and even MBS in Saudi Arabia and others, they didn't put up with stuff. So that when the West goes out, and we were a part of this, we took out Gaddafi. And when we did that, we allowed chaos in Libya. We allowed a civil war in Libya. Now, I'm not blaming the United States. What I am blaming is the leadership. We have really good people, and all we need is just good leadership. And remember, I think it's in Job chapter 29, where the leaders wicked leaders walk in a trackless wasteland. God sends them there. He gives them grand illusions, and they destroy countries. He brings one up, he brings down another because of the wickedness of our countries and the wickedness of our leaders. And so when we took Gaddafi out, we caused the chaos. We allowed it to happen. Islamists move into the void. They cause civil wars. Now there's multiple terrorist groups, and democracies there's some democracies. The Kurds are in Syria, but that whole Syria, the old civil war in Syria is a complete disaster. And I believe Obama could have prevented a bunch of that, but he allowed the Russians in there now, and it's just a complete mess there. Of course, what we did to Saddam Hussein is we went in and we destroyed their government. You remember, 250,000 security troops, Sunni security troops, were fired by the United States, and it turned it over to the Shias, and the Shias started killing the Sunnis, and the Sunnis, that's what led to ISIS in northern Iraq. And don't let anybody tell you different. That's exactly what happened. Generally I like President Bush for our country, but remember that the Middle East has a very, very long memory, and they understand the Middle East, and the United States still doesn't understand the Middle East, and especially God's work there. So anyway, you can see what happened was the money that was supposed to go for the dams never got there, and it was siphoned off, and it just never, those dams were never repaired, and good people, a lot of people died. Should talk about this just for a second. Don't really want to get into rumors, and I'm not really sure what to say about Kristi Noem, our governor in South Dakota. It's our governor, my governor, I should say, and our governor in the state there. And I hope this is a lie, but the devil's after us all, and the left are going to take care of this now, and they're going to go after this. This is Lewandowski. This is Trump's advisor. And Kristi Noem, very, very conservative. She's made some changes in the last few months, or actually years, that haven't been that great, but she's still very conservative in general. This is not good for the Republican Party and the conservatives. And again, the idea for the left is to tear down the right, and then Satan's idea was when we get rid of the right, we're going to go after the church. So just kind of remember that. And the sun's moving, and I'm going to move here just a little bit and see if we can move just a little bit. I think that's a little better. So GOP lawmakers slam Tommy Tuberville's military blockade. This guy is in charge of the generals, okaying the generals that Biden puts forward, that the Secretary of Defense puts forward to Congress, and this Texas congressman is stopping all of Biden's nominees. Again, I was part of the military for 22 years, and I kind of understand this. This is a shame what is happening here. Tuberville and many others like me want to stop the woke issue that has entered the military. We want it to stop. But at the same time, when you stop these generals from being taking over their positions, you put the military in a very difficult place. So what do? God has put us here. He's making us walk to trackless wastelands because of our sin, because of our leadership. It's a terrible thing to see the United States. I used to call the Air Force the last frontier. It was conservative, it was clean, it was well formed, well united. It's a disaster now. Everything is just a real disaster, and it's very sad. But God is coming, and He's going to straighten it all out. Along those same lines, U.S. troops arrive in Armenia for training, and it riles Russia. Armenia is Russia's friend. Azerbaijan is Turkey and Israel's friend, has been the United States, but Russia is trying to get more into Azerbaijan because of the oil there. And so and because of the Ukraine thing, Russia has really kind of given up on Armenia in a large way. And so the United States is saying, well, we need to keep peace in the region, so we need to go up and settle in Armenia and try to help them. And we're going to still help Azerbaijan and Turkey and the West, and the United States is trying to fill these voids here. Very interesting pattern what's going on, but it shows that there is a real lack of ability in Russia to cover all its bases now, literally bases. And we're going to see more of this. In fact, I've got something else coming up here that it shows that Russia has had to pull troops out of places, leaderships, and other places. There's some places they're not going to give up. They're not going to give up Syria for nothing. That's the end road there. They're going to bring everything down to the warm water ports, and I think into the Sinai Peninsula at some point because of oil. Anyway, the U.S. is trying to step in places where it probably shouldn't be. And again, we mess up like Afghanistan, and we think we can fix this mess. This mess right here is Russia and Armenia and Turkey and Azerbaijan, and Iran is upset at Azerbaijan and not real friends with Armenia, and it's a big huge mess. It's that Gordian knot that we talked about, where it has to be untied for these people to become friends, and the United States is a cog in the wheel. So I'm not going to try to lay all this whole thing out, but it's a disaster. It's a big mess, has to be cleaned up. I believe that the United States still is a huge, like I said, cog in the wheel. We are in the way. We have to be taken out. So for somebody to fill that void. Now the West will grow, and it is growing. We're going to talk about Poland and the increase in military aid and military troop buildup in Poland. You think about it, Poland is now the front line if Ukraine falls in particular. And so Poland is going to become very, very important. It was before, but it's ultra important now. And it's going to put a lot of money towards its defense. The EU and the United States is going to pour a lot of money into Poland's defense. And that's going to be the hard line there, is Poland, because after Ukraine is Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Romania, Moldova, of course. But anyway, so we'll continue to watch this as the United States tries to feel its way around. It's not very good at it. The United States is not being led in a real good way right now. Scientists say a new geological epoch called the Anthropocene is here. So, I don't know. I'm not a geologist, or I'm not really a historian in any big way, but you go through the dinosaur ages and all these ages, and they've got ages for when they believe things changed over the last millions and millions of years. So they have all these epochs or these ages, and the scientists say we've entered a new one. The Earth has entered a new geological epoch, defined by the human impact. Defined by the human impact. That's the key. Scientists say humanity's influence on the Earth is so great. That is so humanistic. It's so great. An entirely new geological epoch called the Anthropocene should be declared, according to the scientists from the working group on the Anthropocene, who recommended the change to the International Geological Congress in Cape Town, South Africa, Monday, The Guardian reported. So apparently we've entered a new age. Now, what's really interesting about this article, and I've looked it up, and this is what they're trying to do, trying to call out global warming and all this other stuff. Remember, they're calling it climate change now because global warming wasn't working. The sun keeps moving here. Look what they put the picture. Look what Time put as the picture on here. This is not a cloud. This has nothing to do with weather. This is an atomic bomb. So these are scare tactics again to try to get people to line up and pay the piper, which is going to be our governments trying to bring this stuff down on us. We're in, it used to be by the year 1995, and then the year 2000, and then the year 2010, and now I don't know what it is now, what they've got it up to now, but we're supposed to be out of oil, we're supposed to be out of this, we're supposed to be in trouble as far as climate. The oceans and the rivers are supposed to have climbed so several inches or whatever, and so many coastal towns are supposed to be underwater now. And then we're breaking heat records. There's no doubt about that. We broke a ton this summer again, but we also busted a whole lot of winter records. So that's why they say, climate change. And what I would ask is, okay, climate change, but explain to me how you get the cold if you're talking, and they all centered around the ozone layer, Well, tell me how that's causing the cold factor, And again, as one of our elders at church a farmer talks about, we need carbon dioxide for the plants. The more carbon dioxide you have, the more plants grow, and they like that stuff, remember. So anyway, it's a humanity is in a bad way. They're not very wise. The Anthropocene epoch should begin in about 1950 as man-made developments ended the geological time frame defined by the current epoch, the Holocene. The scientists said the Holocene encompasses the 12,000 years since the last ice age. Now, they had a mini ice age in the I think it was the 1300s, 1350. But yeah, they're going back 12,000 years. Well, us people who believe in the young Earth, we only know that we only go back to 6,000 years. Mid 20th century phenomena such as carbon dioxide emissions, rising sea levels, the global mass extinction of species, and deforestation have ended the Holocene epoch, the scientists said. The Anthropocene should be defined geologically by the effects of nuclear bomb tests, plastic pollution, concrete, and more, according to the scientists. And I would say, why don't they ask God? Because they remember the book of Genesis. After the flood, it talks about the seasons are going to continue, the moon's going to rise, the sun's going to rise, the plants are going to come up. All we have to do is mind the Lord, and we won't have famines and droughts and floods and all these other kind of things. So, but that's where we're at now. I'm going to move again because God's Son is moving, so I'm going to move. Not his S-O-N, S-U-N. As one defense executive put it, war is good for business. Consultant McKinsey reports that Russia saw its defense exports fall. Russia's defense exports fall 21% over the first year following the Ukraine invasion, creating further openings for Western arms sales in the developing world. You will remember that Russia, their primary, they sell a lot of grain, they sell a ton of oil, and they sell a lot of weapons. And I think weapons, if not second, it was third in their GDP income. So overall, it expects military spending to increase globally by an average of 4% a year through 2028, led by, Japan increasing its military budget by 14%. There's the word unprecedented again. 14%. Nobody's even near that. The highest, they want to get Poland to 4%, and that's double what everybody else is paying. So 14% is crazy. Why are they doing that? Because of China. And they're ramping up to be a kin to the Australians and the United States, and to take on China if China steps out of line with Taiwan and the Sea of Japan and all that stuff. So Japan is increasing a ton. Britain doubled its arm exports in 2022 to a record 8.5 billion, dominated by major arms purchases from where? Qatar and Saudi Arabia, the people with a lot of money, with significant volumes also going to the U.S. and Turkey. British officials also hope the August, now that's the Australian, United Kingdom and U.S. agreement will provide nuclear sub-technology to Australia, and it will open the other doors to arms sales and stuff. So arms is huge business right now around the world as armies prop up. And remember, this is being brought about by China and Russia, in particular Russia. Now all of Europe is saying we need to ward off Russia, and the Arabs are saying we're getting a ton of money, a lot of money out of oil, and we need to be able to use that money to secure ourselves. The problem that the Arab nations have is they don't have the armies, they don't have the expertise. So they're going to buy the high-end stuff, the stuff that is UAV and easier to run and yet very potent. So Saudi Arabia wants to move towards getting in nuclear reactors, and then maybe even after that nuclear weapons. So they want the stuff to be able, the high-end stuff that they can buy to protect themselves from Iran and others. But right now, just remember that Saudi Arabia wants guarantees. They want a defense guarantee from the United States, and that's a big, huge push for the Abraham Accords. That if the Saudi Arabia can get the United States to come on board with defense security guarantees. You're going to come to our defense. Then Saudi Arabia is going to move really close to signing the Abraham Accords, and the Palestinians will be on the outs in a big way if they don't make a move right now. Because Saudi Arabia, I think they've kind of had enough. The Congolese government has squashed rumors of a coup attempt. So again, remember, this is in the Congo in Africa, and the reason I'm just showing this is because there was either another attempt or a conspiracy about an attempt in the Congo of Africa, and this would be, I think, the 9th country in the last couple of years. If this coup, the president was out of state when something happened. We're going to follow this up, but that's a big major playground also for Russia and China, Iran, and others. So France, of course, is a big deal here. So we'll keep track of that. And then in Italy, 6,000 immigrants invade an Italian island with a population of merely 8,000. So that just again reminding us of Daniel chapter 2 and some other places where it looks like there was some indications that this might come about. Something weird would happen with the 10 toes of the Nebuchadnezzar's statue there, the sand mixing with, or the iron mixing with clay. And it's a real disaster. Immigration around the world is a huge disaster, and it has absolutely ruined so many parts of Europe. So something to watch. And again, what it's doing to America is horrendous, really just a terrible thing. More later on that as well. Analysis: upheaval in Xi's world. Xi is making people disappear. This is a foreign minister is gone. A defense minister now is gone. Some major oligarchs. Alibaba, which is a huge company, that guy disappeared for a while and came back praising Xi, and yet he never got back into his office. He doesn't have the status he had before. He's just kind of on the sidelines. You remember the old president tried to intervene in what Xi was doing, and he got walked out of the parliament there, and disappeared basically. So Xi, Peter Zion, and some others say that he's a one-man band. If he doesn't like what you say, he's either not going to listen to you or get rid of you. People are afraid to go to him now, tell him the truth. And in Russia, Putin's kind of the same way, but this guy here is a bad deal. So we'll see how this kind of all plays out. It's a really a very interesting thing what will happen to these leaders. Along with that, Russia troops withdraw from Norway border in a drop since the start of the Ukraine war. Now, why would they take troops from the the Norwegian border? Because either one, they need them, which I think is the case, and two, Europe is not the major threat right now. They put them up there to ward off any so-called conspiracies that maybe the West had to invade Russia, which is never going to happen basically, but Russia's paranoid, Putin's paranoid. So they're being decimated, troops are being decimated in Ukraine, and I think they're pulling troops to help what's happening in Ukraine. MBS, the new Europe will be the Middle East. In other words, all the money, all the status, NATO, the huge military, of course. This includes, of course, the United States, because we were the backbone of the military for Europe and the world in particular, the security for the whole world. Since 1948, the Second World War, the United States basically said, we will police the world, keep the peace, put your money toward NATO, and let's keep the peace together and stuff. But the United States has been the backbone, and MBS has a lot of ideas about propping up their military, propping up their money, propping up their 15-minute cities, digging for gold. They've got huge gold and other reserves underneath their sands, and they're getting a lot of nations to come in with money to chime in and try to get it, dig that stuff out. So we'll see what this happens. Now remember, the king is still alive. His dad is still alive. When he dies, I think there will be some huge changes. There already has been some. Women can drive now, and they can go to theaters, and there's a few things that have changed in Saudi Arabia. The Christian church is not totally accepted yet, but hints of it being accepted have been promoted by MBS. But MBS also is a hardliner in that it's going to be my way, the highway, and you can just talk to Khashoggi and the Turks and others about that. So anyway, Saudi Arabia to Israel. Yes, to economic normalization. This is the main headline of the Lebanese newspaper Al Akhbar, which is affiliated with Hezbollah, which also displays on the cover a photo with the sign of the Israeli delegation that is openly participating in the UNESCO conference in Riyadh. Now, I want to remind you, they were having the UNESCO conference in Riyadh. Saudi Arabia said no to the passports and the visas for the Israeli delegation, and then they changed it at the last minute. The Saudi Arabia is trying to send two messages. One, we're not pro-Israeli, we don't love them, but two, we're going to use them, and we're going to be the boss, and nobody tells us what to do. But they want this peace because it means a ton more money, and they are going to be the big dogs when it concerns the Temple Mount and Islam and Sunni, especially Sunni Islam. They want to be the king dogs, and it comes down to religion, folks. It really does come down to religion, but money is the driver of all of this. So not their God, Allah, he can't do anything. It's their money. The Palestinians are trying to build a place on Mount Ebal at Joshua's temple, Joshua's altar, I'm sorry. And this is supposedly where Joshua made the altar and told the Israelites to serve their God. And he wrote on plaster on the sides, the Ten Commandments and stuff. So, and it's a viable place to be. That it probably is Joshua's altar, but they want to tear it down, and they're already excavating. You can see excavations going around there, and they want to completely take this place out. We'll see what happens. Remember, Mount Gerizim is over there, and then this is Mount Ebal. You can tell Mount Ebal has a lot less trees. Iran proposes Turkey withdrawing troops from Syria in exchange for safety guarantees. So Iran is telling Turkey, withdraw your troops, and we'll provide the safety for the Turkish border and in Syria. So Iran is trying to make headway with Turkey. This is the Gordian knot again. That this is the Shias and the Sunnis. The Shias are Iran, Sunnis are Turkey. They hate each other, and they both, according to their Qurans and their writings, both should be killing each other. But remember, Israel is is the little Satan, and America is big Satan, and they are going to combine troops to try to get us out of here, out of Syria, out of the Middle East. Again, the United States is the cog in the wheel, and we have to be taken out of the way, one way or the other. It'll be interesting to see how the Lord decides to do that. Israel says it found 16 tons of rocket-making substance headed from Turkey to Gaza. So we know that Hamas in Gaza visits Turkey, and they're friends with Turkey, and Turkey is trying to help them and the jihad, Islamic Jihad in the West Bank in Israel, to try to stir things up in Turkey, keep things unsettled. Turkey wants the Ottoman Empire back, and Israel was a part of that. The Temple Mount was a part of that. And so Saudi Arabia wants it, Israel wants it. Well, and besides, Israel wants all the oil down there. I mean, Turkey wants all the oil down in Iraq, which used to be the Ottoman Empire, in Jordan, in Israel, the gas in the Mediterranean. Turkey wants all that because they want the old empire back, just like Russia wants their old empire back as well. The Bangkok Post, a new dawn of cooperation is here. On 15th, we commemorated a significant milestone of signing the accords, the UAE, Bahrain, and others. And so they're saying a new dawn of operation is here concerning the Abraham Accords, and people want in on it. And you know what? Whose idea this is? This is President Trump's idea, and it's all about money. It's all about trade. It's all about selling your oil, selling your wares. This is where we talked about the corridor last week between India and basically the Mediterranean and into Europe. That corridor is going to split the Russian corridor, the Iranian corridor, and the one that heads over, the Suez Canal, all the ships going up through the Suez. This corridor will split and go right through the UAE and Saudi Arabia, through Israel into the Med, and now that corridor. Now this is funny. If you think like I do, the Biden administration stopped the Mediterranean pipeline that Cyprus and Israel was going to build 2 years ago. They put a stop to it, and then 2 years later, they come up with this corridor to Israel. And how are you going to get the gas, the LNG, to Europe? A pipeline. Now they're going to use ships initially, LNG and all that, which is very, very expensive. But it'll take 10 years or more to build that pipeline, and it'll be back on the books, I believe, even maybe with the Biden administration, but for sure with the next one. I would think that a pipeline, it only makes sense because the corridor goes now from India to Haifa in Israel, and then where do you go from Haifa to Europe? Because that's where this gas is going. How do you get across there? Cheapest pipeline. So we'll watch and see again what happens with that. Biden is not very wise. The U.S. is the first in China, is second, Russia is third, Germany fourth, and down the line here, Israel drops one spot to the 11th place as far as world rankings. This has to do with military power, economics, and everything. So now that doesn't look great for Israel, but actually it is. Think about how tiny it is. There's 95 nations, and so Israel is number 11, and that's a big deal, huge deal. And remember, where we're at in prophecy right now is we are in Ezekiel 36 and 37. Israel comes back. The Lord is bringing those bones. Remember, he says, can those bones live? The bones are living. There's no breath in them yet. They are back in the land in unbelief, and so when the Lord blows his breath into them, then they'll be an eternal nation there again. But they got to be driven out one more time because of their unbelief and sin right now. Saudis, the Palestinian Authority in judicial form. This is what PM Netanyahu and President Biden will discuss. The only reason I put this up there, this is at the UN, and Biden still is not inviting Netanyahu to Washington, D.C. They're going to go to the UN in New York, and that's as close as Netanyahu's going to get. So Biden is playing games. He wants to be the top dog, and yet he's lost so much credibility in the world. It's a tough deal. Now, let's get into Israel a little bit. Dead Sea inscription confirms a biblical reference, researcher claims. Look at this site here. This is above the Dead Sea. This is in the Qumran caves. And watch what this says. About 50 years ago, a Paleo Hebrew inscription was discovered in a cave near En-Gedi. The partial inscription was painted on a stalactite with carbonate ink around the 7th BC, 7th century BC. Dr. Geyer decided it was time to revisit the site to rephotograph the inscription using different imaging. Such imaging has already done wonders to reveal invisible text on pottery shards and other engravings. He invited his geologist, Boaz Langford, to join in. They recruited Israeli authority Halevi to record the expedition, and they found this inscription: blessed in the valley of salt. And so that was an inscription they found on one of the stalactites. And it reminds us of Psalm 60 verse 2, you have made the land to quake, you have torn it apart, repair its breaches for it totters. That's what they wrote on their article, but watch 2 Samuel 8:13, and David made a name for himself when he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites in the valley of salt. So blessed in the valley of salt. Brings us to the end of the Bible News Update. I'm just going to do a couple slides on Isaiah tonight. I want to remind you, and I believe it puts a huge emphasis on prophecy when we think of something this way. When the Old Testament can be brought alive by this one thought. It can come alive to you by this one thought, that it's not just history. And in fact, I believe that much more of it is prophecy based on history. And there's a tapestry going on, a spectrum of history and prophecy intermingled where you can't tell the difference sometimes. There's typologies. Everything God is doing is pointing to Jesus Christ. Jesus said, all of this points to me. Well, he's future. And not just a future baby. We leave him there. I mean, we still leave him in the crib and the manger. And during Christmas, we sing those Christmas songs, and they're wonderful. But what about the King? When do we get to see the King and the work of the King and the dominance of the King and the throne of the King and the city of the King? He is coming. It is coming, and I believe it's all of this leads up to that or even references it. So I want to remind you that so many good prophecy teachers are talking about chapter 17 being of Damascus, and the only reason that they talk about it because it's still a city that stands there. But I want to ask the question. Chapter 13, there's the judgment of Babylon. Is that still to come? Yes. Read Revelation 18, 17, 18, 19. Chapter 14, the restoration of Jacob. Is that still to come? Yes. So then chapter 17 is still to come. How about chapter 16? What about Moab? Is that still to come? Yes. Cush, Egypt and Cush, Babylon. The oracle concerning Babylon again. That's a bookend. All right. Everything in between there is still to come. There's some historical stuff there, and yet it's still to come. Those were types that happened in the past that leads to the future. Okay. So we're up to chapter 20. Now watch what chapter 20. We were talking about the prophecies that God had against those nations, and again, everybody says, "Well, that's past and it's already done," and I'm convinced it's not. But then we come up to chapter 20, and this you would think, well, this benefits their idea that this is done in the past, and this was done in the past. But you have to remember that this, which was done in the past, and by the way, between 14 and 19, those were all prophecies to the future. You have one chapter, and a very short chapter, this is it, of history that actually happened. And then right after that, you've got prophecy for future again. So what is chapter 20 telling you? It's stuck in a bunch of prophecy. So watch, let's read it and find out. In the year that the commander-in-chief, who was sent by Sargon, who was really the first big Assyrian king before Sennacherib and others. He was the main guy. He brought Assyria to the heights there. Came to Ashdod and fought against it and captured it. And that's on the coast of Israel. And that time the Lord spoke by Isaiah, the son of Amos, saying, "Go and hold and loose the sackcloth from your waist and take off your sandals from your feet." And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. Excuse me. Then the Lord said, as my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot for 3 years as a sign and a portent against Egypt and Cush. Now, we just read 3 chapters of Egypt, or 2 chapters of Egypt and Cush. 3 total, I think, but there was 2 of them concerning Egypt. So shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptian captives and the Cushite exiles, both the young and the old, naked and barefoot, with buttocks uncovered, the nakedness of Egypt. Then they shall be dismayed and ashamed because of Cush, their hope, and of Egypt, their boasts. So, they're going to be put to shame because Egypt was their hope, and Cush was their hope. They boasted to be the leaders in that region and were going to help Israel and even some others, but in particular Israel. Remember, Israel always went to them for help against Assyria and others, but Assyria came and decimated them. And the inhabitants of this coastland will say in that day, behold, this is what has happened to those in whom we hoped and to whom we fled for help to be delivered from the king of Assyria, and how shall we escape? So now the Israelites in the future will say, look what happened to Egypt, look what happened to Cush. And I want to remind you that Cush is part of the Ezekiel 38 war and all these kinds of things. But in particular, I want to remind you of what the Antichrist will do. He will take over these lands. He will take over Cush. He will take over many other places. But there's a particular place in Daniel chapter 11 that says Egypt will not escape. And so, like, Egypt is this big, Pharaoh, this crocodile in the river. Israel always went to Egypt for help. And it says, in particular, Daniel says, Egypt will not escape. In other words, there's a judgment for for Egypt. It will be under the hand of the Antichrist. I want to remind you what we saw in Isaiah chapter 11, where the Lord says, I will send a deliverer to Egypt. And the Lord is gonna dry up that sea. They're gonna walk across it on sandals. So I want to remind you that this is history. And God is saying the tribulation's coming and the Assyrians coming. Micah chapter 5. Again, the king, Jesus, will beat up, he will take out the Assyrian who is in the land of Israel in Micah chapter 5. And so this is historical, and yet it is a type of what is to come. It's prophetic, as the Lord has promised help for his people. And so next week we'll get into Isaiah chapter 21, and we'll get into the oracle of the Negev and a vision to come. Keep your hopes up, as bright as that sun up there. Keep your smile smiling, your face smiling. Help each other in the church. Read your Bibles. Have hope in Christ. Know that your sins are thrown as far as the east is from the west. They're gone, and you are his child. And as dirty as it's going to get, as dark as it's going to get before we are taken out of here, God and Jesus is our hope. And in all of these troubled times, the Lord always will say at the end of whatever Sargon did or Sennacherib did or anybody, Nebuchadnezzar, he said, I'm going to take Israel back. And if he's a liar about that, he's a liar about us, and he's not. Israel is back in the land. If you want to know what God's doing, watch Israel. And so we know what he's doing, and so our hope is secure. Not by really what we're seeing, but what we know, what the scriptures say, that Jesus said, if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you where I am. If it wasn't so, I would have told you, he said. He's not lying. So he's coming back to get us. have huge hope in Him. And I love you and look forward to seeing you in about a week or so. Big hugs.